The U.S. Navy's nuclear-powered submarines are America's strongest deterrent against World War, and its most lethal weapon should the unthinkable ever happen. The elite submariners who dedicate their lives to the silent and mysterious world below the ocean surface are the Navy's highest skilled warriors, as well as its most self-disciplined sailors. This top-secret team of man and machine lie in wait to attack Soviet naval vessels or to launch a torrent of nuclear warhead-tipped ballistic missiles should the fateful message from Washington ever be transmitted. It took the genius of John P. Holland to engineer the first submarines which could both operate underwater and fight. His crowning achievement was the Holland No. 8, which was armed with 3 crude torpedoes and a standard deck gun. This new naval weapon and its courageous crews were ready for war. The German Imperial Navy deployed their U-boats in the North Sea as tactical weapons to sink Allied convoys full of troops and supplies. U-boats quietly maneuvered unseen at periscope depths to within striking distance of unsuspecting ships. Their crews aimed by sight and fired gyroscope-guided torpedoes. The U-boats were powered by oxygen-hungry diesel engines, so most of the time was spent on the surface with its crews looking for targets. But if an Allied ship discovered them first, it would fire all the guns it had at the hated German vessels. Submerging was the best defense for a submarine under attack. Cannon fire was, of course, ineffective against this tactic, but with the advent of the depth charge, a ship could now fight back hard. After sinking 6.5 million tons of British shipping, the German U-boats were finally defeated. The submarine had won a lot of respect from even the toughest critics for its World War I successes. World War II would soon make it the most feared naval weapon in the Atlantic and Pacific. The Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor was carried out by a powerful Navy capable of fighting thousands of miles from a home port. The Japanese Navy also shipped back home the raw materials necessary for war. If America was to defeat Japan, the Imperial Navy had to be destroyed. Many battleships and destroyers were hit in this infamous attack. Luckily, the Navy's fleet of submarines were safely out to sea. The Japanese midget subs which washed ashore were signs of their lack of submarine development. This mistake would result in their inability to stop the advance of our Pacific fleet. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, Germany was once again trying to cut off America's supply convoys to Great Britain with its U-boat wolf packs led by Karl Dönitz. German engineers had refined their World War I submarine designs by making the hulls more streamlined. The Type 7 and 21 U-boats were faster than any other submarine and were able to stay submerged much longer. The U-boat crews were also much smarter after having studied the most successful World War I tactics. But the diesel engine U-boat's dependency on oxygen limited its underwater patrols to a few hours at most. This was best used just prior to an attack or for escape. Simple hydrophones helped detect noisy Allied ships on the surface. Switching to the U-boat's battery-charged electric engine for underwater propulsion, the crew would maneuver the now more quiet submarine into position for an attack. Visual sighting by periscope confirmed the victim's location. During the height of the battle for the North Atlantic, German Wolf Pack sunk more than 150 Allied ships while losing only 4 U-boats. Many ships were hit just off America's eastern seaboard. Silent Otto Kretschmer of U-boat 99 was World War II's leading ace with 44 merchantmen and 1 destroyer sunk. However, this time the Allies responded quickly to the U-boat menace. They developed hydrophones of their own and sonar which could detect the underwater presence of a U-boat. Allied anti-submarine tactics also improved, and depth charges were made increasingly lethal. Warfare between ships and U-boats became a psychological game of hide and seek as each captain tried to outguess the strategy of his opponent. Surfacing was the only chance a U-boat had if its hull was damaged by an exploding depth charge. German submariners felt it was better to fight it out as long as possible with the ship on the surface, rather than to risk drowning in a leaky submarine. After suffering too many times from the sudden and terrifying U-boat attacks, ship crews were anxious and well motivated to finish off a floundering German sub. Despite their heavy losses toward the end of the war, the German U-boats still represented the state-of-the-art of submarine development. All captured U-boats were analyzed by the Allied navies to uncover any new design features that could be incorporated into their own submarines. Their crews were interrogated to learn tactical secrets. In the battle for the Pacific, U.S. Navy submarines would have to operate at sea for as long as 60 days and patrol in waters thousands of miles from port in order to take the war to Japan. With this in mind, the Gato and Balao class subs were built for reliability, endurance, reload, and crew comfort. Like all other World War II subs, they had a diesel-electric power plant. Interestingly, they were 311 feet long, yet could dive only to 300-foot depths. The subs carried an impressive load of 34 torpedoes with 6 tubes in the bow and 4 in the stern. The early Mark 14 torpedoes were unreliable, but the later Mark 18s, which were copied from the German G7, sunk over 1 million tons of Japanese shipping. Rear Admiral James Fife, commander of the Navy's Pacific Submarine Fleet, ordered his submariners to pursue relentlessly, remembering that the mission is to destroy every possible enemy ship. Not let cripples escape or leave them to sink. Make sure that they do sink. With a solid understanding of the nature of submarine warfare, these fearless sailors pressed home attack after attack until they had sunk 90% of Japan's merchant fleet and 1/3 of her warships. All of this destruction was achieved from submarines which numbered no more than 2% of the entire U.S. naval fleet. No other World War II weapon system was as deadly as the submarine. It was unbearably hot inside when submerged, but as long as they still had torpedoes, nothing could stop the crew from carrying out their mission. Two of the skillful submariners' favorite tactics were the down-the-throat shot, in which they dared to ram a Japanese destroyer head-on and then fired a fatal torpedo just as the destroyer came in for its kill, and the up-the-skirt shot, in which the submarine hid in a destroyer's wake and then fired a torpedo into the ship's stern. The Japanese Empire had conquered much of China, Southeast Asia, the East Indies, and most of the West Pacific Islands. As American submarines cut Japan's lifeline to these far-flung lands bit by bit, they got closer and closer to Japan herself. Once inside the Sea of Japan, Heidmann's Hellcats, led by Commander Heidmann in the USS Sea Dog, sunk 27 merchant ships and 1 Japanese submarine. At sunrise on 29 November 1944, Commander Enright of the USS Archerfish located the giant 65,000-ton Japanese aircraft carrier Shinano on her shakedown cruise. 6 hours of chasing and 6 torpedoes later, the Shinano was sunk. This was the largest ship sunk by a submarine during the entire war. With no sonar, the Japanese Navy was poorly equipped to detect approaching submarines. Its depth charges, though, could be very effective. As the battle for the Pacific waged on, more and more guns were added to the decks of U.S. Navy submarines. This slowed down their underwater speeds considerably. But with a limited operating time when submerged, it was important to fight hard on the surface as well. Many times, ships were only damaged after being hit by a torpedo, and rather than waste another precious fish, it was easier to finish a disabled ship with rifles and cannon fire. America's Pacific submarine fleet was an overwhelming victor over the Japanese Navy. Out of 205 Gato and Balao class subs, only 18 were lost, pointing out the advantages of a sturdy submarine design and a well-trained crew. A new naval tradition had begun. By the late 40s, U.S. submarines had so many guns, antennas, and other deck equipment that they resembled a small battleship more than a sleek underwater vessel. To fight more of their battles while submerged, Navy submariners needed to be free from having to surface for oxygen, as well as dive faster and deeper. Navy engineers responded by stripping the Gato and Balao decks clean from any clutter that would slow the subs down and waste precious electric power. These converted subs were called guppy, or Greater Underwater Propulsive Power Submarines. In addition, the conning towers were streamlined and a snorkel was added so the diesel engines could breathe while the submarine was partially submerged. Crews immediately noticed the improved performance. The deployment of new and more lethal weapons was the next logical step. A submarine with its natural stealth was a perfect place to hide a mobile cruise missile launching platform. A Regulus SLCM, or Sea Launch Cruise Missile, was tucked away inside a cylindrical port-mounted deck hangar when submerged. It was designed to hit large fixed targets within the Soviet Union. Admiral Hyman G. Rickover was one of the U.S. Navy's outstanding submarine officers and the most influential person in submarine warfare since John Holland. He oversaw the application of basic atomic weapon research to create a self-contained nuclear power plant. This method of propulsion, which heats water into steam to spin turbines, finally freed the submarine from its dependency on oxygen to become a fully underwater vessel. The new engine was installed in the Navy's biggest submarine yet. It took almost 2 years to build. The launching of the USS Nautilus was celebrated by both politicians and the Navy. Its quieter power plant would make the Nautilus's presence harder for anti-submarine forces to detect, and its underwater speed of 22 knots made the Nautilus the world's fastest sub. The Nautilus had a complement of 105 submariners and was designed with 6 torpedo tubes in the bow. Its sonar was so sensitive that it could track a noisy Soviet diesel-electric sub operating nearly 7 miles away. After its initial shakedown, the nuclear-powered Nautilus was sent on test after test, setting new performance and endurance records almost every time out. Their most famous voyage was a non-stop journey from Hawaii to England by traveling under the North Pole. A few years later, the USS Skate would repeat this feat. The Nautilus's long, thin, and sleek hull shape followed the tradition set by the Guppy and the German World War II Type 21. Once proven, the nuclear power plant was soon to be installed in a revolutionary new hull design. Crews had always found their submarines hard to control at high underwater speeds, even more so with the ultra-fast Nautilus. Navy engineers then set to work on a hull shaped like a classic dirigible. The experimental USS ALBACORE tested out the new hull. The diesel-electric powered sub reached speeds up to an amazing 33 knots. Soon every U.S. Navy submarine would be shaped like the ALBACORE. The rounded teardrop shape of the ALBACORE's symmetrical hull created less drag. Less drag enables a submarine to go faster and operate more quietly. There is excellent control at all speeds and outstanding maneuverability. The torpedo was still the submariner's primary weapon. Wire control, along with passive and active acoustic homing sensors, were added to update guidance capabilities. Increasingly lethal warheads meant that fewer torpedoes would be required for a kill. The USS Snook, Shark, Scamp, Scorpion, Sculpin, and Skipjack are the 6 attack submarines of the famous Skipjack class. They were the first subs to combine the Nautilus's nuclear power, the ALBACORE's hull, and the deadly Mark 37 and 45 torpedoes. Even today, the Navy deploys skipjack submarines as frontline weapons. The USS George Washington was the first ballistic missile submarine. It was built in the late 1950s as U.S. concerns about the Soviets' nuclear missile buildup and orbiting Sputnik satellites grew into a Cold War. The Navy believed that a nuclear submarine's natural underwater stealth would make it the perfect missile launching pad, benefiting deterrence and combat readiness. 16 silos containing the Polaris missile were inserted into a Skipjack-class attack sub. The Polaris concept of an underwater launch missile was developed by Admiral W.F. Rayborn and the Lockheed Corporation. Years of hard work and testing proved that this bold and innovative weapon system was possible. The missile is ejected from a submarine silo with high-pressure air or steam toward the ocean surface. Once clear, the missile ignites while its guidance system calculates the flight path. Although most data concerning submarine launch missiles are classified, their loading operations are usually carried out in the open so that Soviet spy satellites can easily watch. As part of NATO's nuclear deterrent, it is vital that the Soviets understand just how lethal the U.S. Navy's ballistic missile submarines would be in case of war. The 5 subs of the George Washington class were quickly constructed to deploy Polaris as soon as possible. The later Ethan Allen, Lafayette, and Benjamin Franklin classes were to serve as the Navy's standard ballistic missile submarines into the 1970s. These classes contain larger silos which could launch even more capable missiles. Men who serve on ballistic missile submarines are especially self-disciplined. Their deep-sea missions off the Soviet Union's continental shelf may last as long as several months. Their sub will probably be submerged during the entire voyage, so they will never once see the light of day. 55% of the Lafayette-class subs are always at sea. Therefore, 2 separate crews, known as Blue and Gold, were formed to rotate these lengthy and demanding faraway assignments. Poseidon and Trident missiles have replaced the original Polaris. These latest weapons have multiple independent reentry vehicle, or MIRV warheads. The Trident missile has a range of 5,000 miles. It has a stellar-based navigation system. With its long range and high target accuracy, Trident-equipped submarines can patrol an unusually large body of water, making their detection by the Soviets much more difficult. Each of its 8 warheads yields 100 kilotons. The Polaris A3 and Poseidon missiles are the replacements for the first Polaris. Their range of almost 3,000 miles is less than the Trident's, though the Poseidon is just as accurate. Lafayette and Franklin subs carrying these missiles are being converted to carry the more effective Trident. The latest Trident II will replace them all. The Polaris missile fulfilled the triad strategy of long-range bombers, land-based missiles, and submarine-launched missiles. Meanwhile, the Soviets have built a deadly submarine fleet of their own. The pride of Premier Gorbachev's submarine fleet is the Typhoon-class ballistic missile submarine. Almost the length of 2 football fields, this is the largest submarine ever built by any nation. It carries 20 huge SSN-20 missiles, each of which is armed with 6 nuclear warheads. The nearly 6,000-mile range of the SSN-20 means that Typhoon subs can strike targets in the continental United States from within the safety of Soviet waters. The Soviets' Yankee-class nuclear-powered submarine is armed with 16 short-range ballistic missiles. Their Victor class is a nuclear-powered attack submarine, and their Juliet class is a diesel-powered submarine armed with anti-ship cruise missiles. The Soviets export the general-purpose Kilo attack submarine to its third world satellite nations. The Delta class improves upon the Yankee design, and the Akula attack sub is the Soviets' fastest and quietest. With these subs and the Foxtrot class, the Soviet Navy has a wide variety of submarines ready to destroy land, surface, or underwater targets. The Soviets began to build their subs using the expertise of German scientists captured after World War II. It is believed that the hulls of the Soviets' latest subs were shaped after studying the swimming motions of dolphins. Their titanium Alpha-class attack submarine can reach 40 knots underwater and dive to 4,000-foot depths, faster and deeper than any U.S. sub. The cruise missiles carried by their Oscar-class submarine can hit targeted ships 300 miles away. Realizing that they could probably never build an aircraft carrier force to match NATO's, the Soviets assigned their submarines the mission of destroying the West naval fleets. Anti-submarine warfare, or ASW, is fought in the air by the Navy's land base P-3 Orion and ship base SH-3 Sea King helicopter. Along with the S-3 Viking, these aircraft carry variable depth sonar, active and passive sonobuoys, and magnetic anomaly detection devices. A data link to ships enables them to detect, classify, and track Soviet submarines. In combat, they can drop torpedoes and depth bombs. In the late 60s, the U.S. Navy built the Permit and Sturgeon class submarines. They were dedicated hunter-killers designed to meet the Soviet underwater threat head-on. The Permits and Sturgeons were larger than the earlier Skipjacks and carried a more advanced sonar. The submariner's traditional weapon, the torpedo, had undergone further development as well, as top speed, warhead lethality, and reliability were increased. Navy hunter-killers are frequently assigned to patrol the waters between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. It is through this choke point, known as the Juke Gap, that Soviet subs must pass if they are to attack convoying NATO ships in the North Atlantic. To destroy the most advanced Soviet submarines, new weapons were added to the Navy's hunter-killers arsenal, such as the submarine-launched rocket or sub-rock. Fired from a standard torpedo tube, it quickly surfaces. A two-stage solid fuel booster then powers the nuclear-tipped warhead through the air, enabling attacks upon Soviet subs, which are too far away for even the most advanced torpedoes. Subrocks allow a crew to attack while staying safely outside the Soviets' torpedo range. Nothing has proved to be better than a torpedo for close-in anti-submarine warfare. The latest advanced capability, Mark 48, can reach a top speed of 63 miles per hour and has a 50-mile range. Its smart guidance system tracks the target with a built-in passive sonar until the Soviet sub realizes that the Mark 48 is on its way. Then the Mark 48 automatically switches to the more accurate active sonar mode for the final moments before detonation. If the hunter-killer's initial attack fails, the two subs can begin a battle that resembles an underwater dogfight. Ejecting decoys and other ASW tricks are commonplace. To win this battle, a hunter-killer sub needs to be faster, quieter, and more maneuverable than its opponent, as well as having the most clever captain. Older Soviet subs don't need much torpedo damage before their hulls begin to collapse under the crushing water pressures found at the ocean's deeper depths. Newer Soviet subs, though, like the Typhoon, have double hulls, which require a more lethal warhead to crack through. The crunching and scraping of twisting metal against metal is eerily echoed on the victorious sub sonar. Aside from an oil stain on the surface, this may be the only evidence of a successful kill. Since its first commissioning in 1981, the U.S. Navy's Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine has become America's most awesome weapon system. Starting with the USS George Washington of 20 years before, the Navy's ballistic missile submarines have served as an effective deterrent to war, helping to maintain peace in the world. 160 submariners live and work inside the sound-tight compartments, which are insulated with rubber and suspended from the hull walls. This special construction stops any sound from echoing out into the surrounding water, which would reveal their classified whereabouts to Soviet sonars. If an Ohio-class sub needs to attack a Soviet sub or ship, it is well armed with Mark 48 torpedoes. For its primary mission, it carries 24 Trident I ballistic missiles. The Ohios are more than twice as large as their predecessors, the Lafayettes, and are far more technologically advanced. The navigator receives his coordinates from orbiting satellites. This data is then transferred to the missile personnel who constantly update Trident target locations. With the Trident's long range, an Ohio-class sub can operate far away from Soviet ASW forces. The U.S. Navy's latest Los Angeles-class design is the free world's most lethal attack submarine. Its mission, simply put, is to hunt down and kill Soviet red subs. To do this, they are armed with a weapon for almost every potential combat scenario, including Mark 48 torpedoes, nuclear warhead-tipped subrocks, sub-Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and Tomahawk cruise missiles. LA-class subs are fast, with a top speed over 30 knots. Their nuclear power can keep them at sea for months at a time. Their sophisticated sonar can track multiple targets. Their silent operation is startling. The men who operate these subs are the best in the world.